Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the observation window, watching the purple-leafed forests sway in Eden's Promise's artificial breeze. After 8 years of careful cultivation, the colony had transformed from a barren rock into a thriving ecosystem. The trees, a hybrid of earth oak and native prism willows, stood 40 feet tall, their roots diving deep into soil that hadn't existed when humanity first arrived. Beautiful, isn't it? Kai stood beside her, his Velusian features reflecting wonder. The young alien's crystalline skin caught the light from the binary suns, scattering rainbows across the observation deck. My people gave up on our homeworld. We thought nothing could grow in irradiated soil. Then you humans arrived with your seeds and your stubborn optimism. Sarah smiled, the kind that came from genuine satisfaction. We didn't save your world alone, Kai. Your people's knowledge of subsurface chemistry was essential. That's what the Verdant Collective is about, combining what we all know to heal what's been broken. It had been 247 years since humanity joined the galactic community, and in that time, they'd found their calling. While other species built weapons or pursued conquest or accumulated wealth, humanity had become the galaxy's gardeners. They terraformed dead worlds. They restored damaged ecosystems. They taught 100 different species how to make deserts bloom and oceans teem with life again. The transformation hadn't been easy. Earth's own environmental near collapse in the 22nd century had taught humanity hard lessons about hubris and consequence. When they'd reached the stars carrying those scars, they'd made a choice. Never again would humans be destroyers. They would be cultivators instead. The Verdant Collective had grown from that choice. Starting with just Earth's colonies, it had expanded to include 17 other species who shared humanity's vision. Together, they moved through the galaxy not as conquerors, but as healers, asking nothing in return except permission to make things grow. Sarah had dedicated her life to this mission. At 43, she was considered one of the premier xenobotanists in known space. She'd developed the soil recombination techniques that had saved 4 dying worlds. She'd crossbred plant species that had never shared the same star system, creating hybrid ecosystems that supported populations of billions. Eden's Promise was her masterwork, a colony where 3 different species lived in harmony, all sustained by carefully cultivated biodiversity. Dr. Chen, the voice through her communicator carried tension. You're needed in the hub, Priority 1. Sarah's face faded. Priority 1 meant something had gone seriously wrong. She glanced at Kai. Check on the North Quadrant planting. I'll join you after this meeting. The colony hub hummed with worried activity. Screens displayed news feeds from across the Verdant Collective's network. Sarah's heart sank as she read the headlines. Kashrik's empire declares expansion rights. 3 verdant colonies in contested space. Diplomatic protest ignored. Military fleet mobilizing. Governor Martinez stood at the center console, her dark eyes reflecting the blue glow of tactical displays. She was a woman in her 60s who'd spent her entire career building bridges between species. Today, she looked like she'd aged 10 years. Sarah, thank you for coming. Martinez gestured to the screens. The Kashriks have given us 72 hours to evacuate Eden's Promise, New Canaan, and Harvest Moon. They claim the systems contain resources they need for their expansion. That's insane. Sarah moved closer to the displays. These are established colonies. We have treaties, agreements with the local sector authorities. The Kashriks don't recognize any authority but strength. This came from Commander Liu, head of colony security. He was technically part of the collective's peacekeeping force, though his 20-person team was better equipped to handle supply disputes than military threats. They've been watching us for 5 years. Our intelligence suggests they see the Verdant Collective as easy targets. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. Because we don't maintain military fleets? Because we garden instead of guard, Martinez said quietly. Because we converted our defensive satellites into weather control systems. Because we've spent 2 centuries proving that violence is unnecessary. The Kashrik's empire controlled 42 systems and was always hungry for more. They were a silicon-based species whose biology required rare heavy metals concentrated in volcanic worlds. They'd built their empire on the principle that resources belonged to whoever could take them. Asking permission was weakness. Negotiation was for species without power. For decades, humanity and the Kashriks had maintained cordial distance. The collective's colonies occupied worlds the Kashriks didn't want, dead rocks and ecological disasters that held no immediate value. But Eden's promise sat in a system rich with promethium, a rare element the Kashriks used in their faster-than-light drives. The fact that humanity had spent 8 years turning the planet into a paradise was irrelevant. The Kashriks saw resources, not gardens. Earth's response? Sarah asked. Martinez pulled up a communication transcript. The diplomatic corps is filing formal protests. They're requesting an emergency session with the Galactic Arbitration Council. They're organizing economic sanctions through our allied species. In other words, nothing that will stop a military invasion in 72 hours? The Corps believes the Kashriks are posturing, that they'll back down when faced with unified condemnation from the galactic community. Martinez didn't sound convinced. Sarah thought of Kai and his people, thought of the Drellian families in the southern hemisphere who'd lost their homeworld to a supernova and found hope here. Thought of the human children born under purple trees who'd never known Earth but considered Eden's promise home. What are our options? Commander Liu brought up a defensive analysis. We evacuate. We can get 90% of the population off-world within 72 hours if we start immediately. We'll lose the infrastructure, the agricultural projects, everything we've built, but we save the people. And go where? Sarah demanded. Kashrik space is expanding in all directions. Today it's 3 colonies, tomorrow it's 10. When do we stop running? When we have the power to make them stop, which we don't. Our ships are cargo haulers and research vessels. We have no weapons platforms, no military fleet, no defense grid. We're not warriors, Sarah. We're gardeners. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to insist that their choice of cultivation over conflict had value beyond the immediate tactical situation. But staring at the countdown timer on the screen, 68 hours, 23 minutes until the Kashrik's ultimatum expired, words felt hollow. There has to be another way, Sarah said. Martinez touched her shoulder gently. Start preparing evacuation protocols for the botanical samples. Priority alpha species first, the ones that can't be replicated. If we have to abandon Eden's promise, at least we can preserve the genetic material. Sarah worked through the night, her hands moving through familiar routines while her mind churned with frustration. She cataloged seeds, preserved tissue samples, documented genetic sequences. 8 years of work reduced to data files and frozen specimens. Kai found her in the seed vault at dawn. Is it true? Are we leaving? I don't know yet. Sarah carefully sealed a container of hybrid prism seeds. Earth is still negotiating. My people negotiated with the catastrophe that destroyed our world. We filed reports and held meetings and formed committees while radiation levels rose. By the time we accepted that words wouldn't save us, it was too late to do anything but flee. Kai looked at Sarah with eyes that had seen too much loss for someone barely into adulthood. Humans saved us because you acted instead of just talking. You came to our world with ships full of soil remediation equipment, not promises. You didn't ask permission or wait for approval. You just started fixing things. That's different. Ecological restoration isn't the same as... Isn't it? Kai interrupted. You saw a problem. You have the tools to solve it. You did what needed to be done. He gestured at the vault around them. These seeds represent hope for dozens of species. The Kashriks want to take that hope and grind it up for fuel. If there are tools to stop them, why wouldn't you use those too? Sarah didn't have an answer that satisfied either of them. The message from Earth arrived 56 hours into the countdown.
Sarah was in the central hub with Martinez and half of the colony's leadership when the priority channel activated. The face on the screen belonged to someone Sarah had never seen before, a woman in her 70s with steel gray hair and eyes that carried weight beyond their years. She wore a simple black uniform with no insignia, no indication of rank or position. "I am General James Morrison," she said, her voice carrying an authority that made everyone in the hub stand straighter. "Former Chief of Ecological Engineering, currently recalled to service as Director of Strategic Response. This message is for Dr. Sarah Chen."
Sarah felt every eye in the room turn toward her. "I'm here, General." Morrison's expression didn't change. "Dr. Chen, your personnel file indicates you held a position with the Terrestrial Defense Initiative from 2173 to 2182, specifically the Environmental Applications Division. Is this correct?" The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. She hadn't thought about those years in decades, hadn't allowed herself to think about them. That was a different life, a different person. "Yes," she said quietly, "but I left that division 24 years ago." "We need you to remember why you left." Morrison leaned forward slightly. "The Kashriks have rejected all diplomatic overtures. Their fleet will arrive at Eden's Promise in 52 hours. We have 3 options: evacuation, surrender, or response. The Collective Council has voted for evacuation. Earth," Morrison paused, "Earth has decided it's time to remember what we were before we became gardeners." The room was silent. Sarah felt her hands trembling. Morrison continued, "There's a ship en route to Eden's Promise. It will arrive in 18 hours. Dr. Chen, you're requested to be on it, along with any other personnel who remember the old protocols." "What protocols?" Martinez demanded. "What is she talking about, Sarah?" Sarah closed her eyes. She'd spent 24 years becoming a healer of worlds, 24 years growing things instead of destroying them, 24 years believing humanity had evolved beyond its darker capabilities. "It's Project Black Soil," she whispered. Morrison nodded slowly. "Project Black Soil. The Kashriks think humans are weak because we grow gardens instead of building guns. They're about to learn why we stopped building guns in the first place." The screen went dark. Governor Martinez turned to Sarah, confusion and concern warring on her face. "Sarah, what is Project Black Soil?" Sarah opened her eyes and looked at the woman who'd become her friend over 8 years of shared purpose and common goals. She thought about how to explain that the knowledge that let you make deserts bloom could also teach you to make gardens die. That understanding how to heal ecosystems meant understanding exactly how to destroy them. That humanity's greatest terraformers had once been its most terrifying weapons designers. "It's the reason," Sarah said softly, "that humanity became gardeners instead of warriors. Because once we understood how to control life itself—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. She didn't need to. In that moment, everyone in the hub understood that they'd only ever seen half of what humanity was capable of. They'd seen the gentle hands that planted seeds and nurtured growth. They'd never imagined what those same hands could do when the gardens burned. Outside the observation windows, the purple forests swayed in artificial breezes, and the countdown timer ticked steadily toward 0. The Kashriks fleet arrived early. Sarah was in the seed vault preparing the final evacuation containers when the alarm screamed to life. Not the soft chimes of standard warnings, the bone-shaking klaxons reserved for immediate threats. Through the reinforced walls, she heard the distant thunder of explosions. They'd had 38 hours left. The Kashriks had promised 72. Sarah's communicator erupted with overlapping voices, panic, confusion, screaming. She ran towards the hub, her heart pounding against her ribs. The corridor shook, lights flickered.
Through the windows, she saw the purple forests she'd spent 8 years cultivating erupt in flames. The hub was chaos. Half the screens were dead, showing only static. The others displayed nightmare images. Kashrik's warships hovering over the colony like metal predators, their weapons systematically destroying everything below. Agricultural sectors burned. The water reclamation facility exploded in a geyser of steam. The habitation domes cracked open like eggs. "Where's Martinez?" Sarah grabbed Commander Liu's arm. His face was covered in blood from a gash across his forehead. "The governor's dome took a direct hit. She's gone, Sarah. They're all gone." The words didn't process, couldn't process. Sarah had shared breakfast with Martinez that morning. They'd argued about whether to evacuate the Drellian orchards or the Velusian crystal gardens first. Martinez had insisted both, had refused to choose between species she'd sworn to protect. Now she was gone. "Evacuation ships?" Sarah asked, forcing herself to focus. "3 made it out, maybe 4,000 people total," Liu's voice cracked. "The rest, the Kashriks targeted the launch platforms first. They're not letting anyone leave." Sarah moved to a functioning console, her fingers flying across the controls. The colony had housed 47,000 souls. Humans, Velusians, Drellians, Korthari refugees, Epsilon traders who'd made Eden's Promise their home. 47,000 lives she'd helped build a world for. The screen showed thermal signatures across the colony. So many had already gone cold. "They're not just attacking," someone said behind her. "They're broadcasting." Sarah pulled up the feed. A Kashrik's commander filled the screen, his silicon features sharp as broken glass, his voice grinding like stones. "Let this be a lesson to the galaxy. The Verdant Collective believes their gardens make them valuable, that their cultivation gives them worth. They are wrong. Resources belong to those strong enough to claim them. Playing in dirt does not make a species powerful, it makes them fertilizer." The screen shifted to show aerial footage of the colony. Every structure humanity had built was burning. The forests Sarah had designed to support 3 different biologies were reduced to ash. The soil, carefully engineered over years to sustain alien and human crops alike, was being scorched to sterile dust. "We will take what we need from these worlds, and we will erase the gardens that offended us with their weakness. Let every species that watches understand. This is the price of pacifism." The transmission ended. Sarah stood frozen, watching the fires spread across her life's work, watching everything she'd built die. She thought of Kai, who'd been checking the North Quadrant when the attack began. She thought of the Drellian families, the human children, the Korthari elders who'd finally found peace after decades of war. The console in front of her beeped, an incoming priority transmission from Earth. Sarah accepted it with numb fingers. General Morrison's face appeared, and for the first time since their initial contact, Sarah saw emotion in those hard eyes. Grief, rage, and something else, recognition of what came next. "Dr. Chen, we've received the broadcasts." Morrison's voice was steady, but something underneath it vibrated with barely contained fury. "I'm sorry, we thought we had time to evacuate." They lied. Sarah heard her own voice from very far away. They promised 72 hours and attacked in 34. They wanted maximum casualties. They wanted to make an example. They succeeded. Morrison looked past the camera at something Sarah couldn't see. Eden's Promise isn't the only target. The Kashrik's High Command is broadcasting across all channels. They're claiming the attacks as a demonstration of strength. They're inviting other species to join in colonizing abandoned Verdant Collective territory. They're calling us exactly what you heard. Gardeners who forgot gardens need walls. Sarah found her voice. And Earth's response? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "Earth is silent. The diplomatic corps wanted to issue immediate condemnation, filed charges with the Arbitration Council, organized coalition sanctions. She paused. The Terrestrial Assembly overruled them. We're not responding at all. What? 28 days, Dr. Chen. That's how long Earth will remain silent. 28 days for every species to watch the Kashrix celebrate their massacre. 28 days for the galaxy to decide that humanity is finished as a force in interstellar affairs. Morrison leaned closer to the camera. And 28 days for us to remember what we were before we became gardeners. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. A door she'd locked and welded shut 24 years ago beginning to open. The ship I mentioned is still en route. It will extract any survivors from Eden's Promise and bring them to Earth. You're expected to be on it. Project Black Soil is being reactivated. General, Sarah stopped, unsure what to say, unsure what to feel. I know what I'm asking, Morrison said softly. I know what you left behind and why. I know the nightmares that made you walk away from the program. I had them too. Her expression hardened. But the Kashrix just murdered 142,000 beings to prove a point about strength. They burned your gardens, Sarah. They killed your people, and they're laughing about it. Sarah looked at the screens showing Eden's Promise burning, looked at the thermal signatures going cold, looked at the future she'd built turning to ash. I'll be ready when the ship arrives, Sarah said. The extraction took 6 hours. Sarah and Commander Liu organized the survivors, 3,847 souls pulled from shelters, tunnels, and the few structures still standing. They left behind everything except emergency supplies and each other. As the transport lifted off, Sarah watched Eden's Promise recede below. The purple forests were black scars now. The rivers ran thick with ash. The cities were rubble. 8 years of work, 8 years of hope, 8 years of believing that cultivation was enough. All gone in 4 hours of violence. The ship to Earth was called the Renewal, a bitter irony that nobody mentioned. It was larger than Sarah expected and far too empty. The handful of survivors from New Canaan and Harvest Moon were already aboard, hollow-eyed and broken. Sarah found a small cabin and sat on the narrow bed, staring at her hands. Gardener's hands, healer's hands. Hands that coaxed life from dead soil and designed ecosystems that supported billions. Hands that once designed other things. She closed her eyes and let herself remember. The Terrestrial Defense Initiative had been founded in 2168, during the brief but terrifying conflict with the Zelnoth swarm. Humanity had barely survived that war, and the experience had taught hard lessons about vulnerability. Earth's military strategists looked at humanity's greatest strength, its ability to shape environments, and asked a terrible question. What if we weaponized that knowledge? Project Black Soil was the answer. Sarah was 23 years old when she joined, brilliant and naive, and convinced she was protecting humanity. The project recruited the best ecological engineers, xenobiologists, and planetary scientists. Their mission was simple: develop environmental weapons that could disable enemy worlds without nuclear devastation or orbital bombardment. Elegant, precise, humane, they called it. They created horrors. Designer plagues that targeted specific biochemistries, atmospheric processors that could trigger ice ages or runaway greenhouse effects, genetically modified organisms that consumed infrastructure, soil catalysts that turned farmland to desert, weather manipulation systems that could create permanent storm patterns.
And the worst one, the one Sarah had helped design, was a self-propagating fungal agent that could be calibrated to break down any organic compound. Properly deployed, it could reduce a planet's entire biosphere to sterile sludge in 18 months. They'd called it the Cascade Decomposer. Sarah had nightmares about it for years. The project had never been used in warfare.
The Xenoth swarm had been defeated through conventional means, and afterward, humanity had looked at what they'd created and felt sick. Project Black Soil was sealed in 2183. Its personnel were reassigned or, like Sarah, allowed to walk away entirely. Humanity had made a choice. Never again would they point their knowledge of life toward death. They would be gardeners, healers, cultivators. They would prove that strength didn't require cruelty. The Kashrix had burned that dream to ash. Sarah opened her eyes. Her hands were shaking. Earth looked different than she remembered. The renewal descended toward a facility Sarah had tried to forget, a complex in the Australian outback that officially didn't exist. As they landed, she saw other ships arriving, other people who'd walked away from Project Black Soil decades ago, now being called home. General Morrison met them on the landing pad. She was flanked by 24 officers Sarah didn't recognize and one she did, Dr. James Okonkwo, who'd been her mentor in the program. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes still held that sharp intelligence that had once excited her and later terrified her. "Welcome home," Morrison said, and the word felt like an accusation. The briefing room was exactly as Sarah remembered. Sterile, windowless, designed to focus minds on the work rather than its implications. Screens showed tactical data, biological models, planetary surveys. The 73 people gathered represented the complete roster of Project Black Soil's senior staff, everyone who'd known the deepest secrets, who created the worst weapons. Morrison stood at the front of the room, her presence commanding absolute attention. The Kashrix Empire controls 42 star systems. Their population is estimated at 73 billion. Their military represents the third largest force in known space. They have spent the last week broadcasting their massacre of our colonies to every species in the galaxy. They have positioned themselves as the strong defeating the weak. Morrison's expression didn't change, but her voice carried an edge that could cut steel. The Terrestrial Assembly has authorized Project Black Soil's full reactivation, not for revenge. Revenge is emotional, for demonstration. The galaxy needs to understand why humanity chose to become gardeners. They need to understand what we're capable of when we stop choosing cultivation over consequence. Dr. Okonkwo stood. "Are we talking about surgical strikes or full deployment?" "Surgical," Morrison said firmly. "This is not genocide. This is not extinction. This is education." She pulled up a star chart showing Kashrix space. "We will target their 3 primary military worlds, their central food production system, and their home world. We will demonstrate our capability. We will force negotiation, and we will ensure that no other species ever again mistakes our kindness for inability." Sarah raised her hand, feeling like a student again. "What about civilian casualties?" Morrison looked directly at her. "Our goal is 0 civilian deaths. These weapons were designed for precision. We will target military infrastructure, agricultural systems, industrial capacity. We will cripple their ability to wage war. We will leave their population alive to suffer the consequences of their leadership's choices." She paused. "But understand, suffering is the point. The Kashrix value strength. We will show them what strength looks like when wielded by species they thought weak." The room was silent. "Dr. Chen," Morrison said, "the Cascade Decomposer, can it be calibrated to target only military-grade construction materials?" Sarah felt her mouth go dry. The Cascade Decomposer was her nightmare made real, and Morrison was asking if she could turn it into something even more precise, even more terrible. "Yes," Sarah heard herself say. "If we have samples of Kashrix military compounds, I can engineer a variant that only breaks down their warship hulls, weapons platforms, and defensive structures. It would leave everything else untouched." "Good. You'll lead that team." Morrison moved to the next topic. "Dr. Okonkwo, atmospheric manipulation. I need something that can generate permanent electrical storms over their primary shipyards without affecting nearby civilian zones."